Welcome again to the Experience Center in Copenhagen for another episode of Data Lab Dialogues. My name is Thomas Madsen. I'm heading the Data Lab here in the Experience Center. And with me today I have Kalle Bergström, of course, as usual, Enterprise Architect.
Thank you, Thomas. Always nice to be here.
Yes, and today actually we have a very special guest, as always, of course, but today in particular, Ingo Pfeiffer, actually.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be back, such a sunny day in Denmark.
Yeah, it is a little bit warm today. If you see us starting to perspire, it is because of the room here. But Ingo, you used to be employed actually at SAP?
Correct, yeah. It's 2015.
Yeah.
I left my employment at SAP, but before that I was for almost 10 years part of the Swedish SAP organization. So good memories to that time.
So yeah, you know your way around the SAP.
But before we start with
Okay.
that, I mean, I am a little bit of a fan to Ingo because I know this guy, he can kite surf really well.
Okay, so we switched the topic.
We switched the topic. We need to start
SAP.
off. Yeah, we will come back probably to that. But I'm wondering, do you have any good spots that kite surfers should visit that's worth coming to?
For sure, you need to come to Stockholm,
Stop.
my home base.
Okay, so that's a place to go.
That's the place to go because we have a spot where you go kite surfing in waves, and if you manage to do that, you can do kite surfing everywhere in the world.
Okay,
Not at Jaws on Hawaii, maybe, but a lot of other places.
But then if the topic isn't interesting, maybe contact Ingo for the reason to find a good spot for kite surfing.
That sounds like a good idea.
And for those guys who know SAP Activate,
Yep.
which will probably be a topic we come back later. Mm-hmm. If you look that up on SAP's pages, the first picture you'll see is a kite surfer.
Oh, really?
And I don't know actually who put it there, but
We need that's
That we need to
something
look
we
up,
need
right?
to figure out.
But is it you?
no, it's not me. Could have been,
Okay.
but I don't know. As I said, I don't know who chose that picture, but I felt very happy to see that as well.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Because there are two passions in your life. One is ALM, the other one is kite surfing.
There are some other passions as well.
Yeah,
but
okay, yeah.
I'm a passionate guy when I feel for it, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, okay, great. But good of you to come to Copenhagen today to
Yes.
talk with us. And the topic of today is ALM. And but before we dig into ALM, could you tell us just a little bit more about your background? Or is ALM basically your background?
No, ALM is not background actually. Originally, I started out getting educated to become a chemical/process engineer. Mm-hmm. So I've been doing blue collar work, been in the pulp and paper industry, doing paper machine maintenance, shift schedule work, all that stuff, understanding theory and practical perspectives of doing pulp and paper making. Mm-hmm. Was employed at Stora Enso for many years. Mm-hmm. And then within that company I came into a team that was working as internal consultants to increase the productivity in our paper mills, and was allowed to get in close contact with factory management, middle management, to work with them over longer periods, like 3-4 months on site, running a program which was intending to involve the workers, including shop floor workers, to identify ideas, prove them with statistics out of production data, to then come up with improvement suggestions how to become more productive. Mm-hmm. And that was focusing on costs, consumption of materials, was focusing on maintenance procedures, how to do maintenance planning, was focusing on chemical topics, etc. So it was kind of different streams, people coming in, getting the guys that know how to run the business, to then come up with ideas and propose them to management for decision making. And I mean, from that learning, I then moved my focus into purchasing processes, and then Stora Enso started an SAP program where I became a process team lead. Yeah, so somehow this education as an internal consultant was a very good foundation to then move into SAP, to understand ways of working and processes.
Breaking down the processes, understand the processes.
And making use of data to improve the ways of working and to improve the processes. Yeah, I mean, in some factories, they didn't even have IT systems for the production. They had these journals where you were writing with a ball pen every tambour that was produced, this big paper mother roll.
Yeah.
They would...
You would make a mark.
on different stations along the machine, they were doing handwritten journals. And we were sitting in these teams and bringing them into Excel.
Yeah.
I mean, that was pre...
not even
system.
Excel, it was paper.
It was paper, and then we brought it
Excel.
to Excel to make diagrams and find patterns to then anchor some kind of ideas and suggestions to improve.
Okay.
And I mean, all that is 25 years ago, 30 years ago, and you know, these machines, they have been running since the 50s, 40s maybe, without having actually gone through any kind of innovations or IT implementations. And thinking back about that, now going into the world where we live with SAP systems being connected
real time,
and you measure values, you get it, and you get the systems propose actions. It's kind of a leap.
Yes. And it's 25 years for some. It feels very long, but it isn't that long. So the curve of change has been dramatic. And then you came into SAP.
Then with Stora Enso and the SAP program there, I was doing that for 6-7 years, all the way until we had rolled out to several factories in Europe. So I was both supporting rollouts and at the same time supporting the operations and maintenance, receiving change requests from the factories that had the productive system in use. So thinking back to those years, I was doing or experiencing a whole life cycle of doing a blueprint for a global template, piloting it, rolling it out, and operating it. And during that time, that was then between 2000 and 2007 maybe, I had not heard about Solution Manager at all. So we were doing all the ALM stuff that we are talking about soon, without Solman, without any SAP tools other than the TMS layers where transports were created and moved. Right, in each landscape individually.
Was that because the tools were not there, or because
Solman was there? But I had not heard about it. There was no consultant involved in the program that had heard about it. IT wasn't pushing it at that time. And if those guys who listen to this now, if they think back about those years, Solman maybe wasn't the tool to recommend either.
And coming from SAP, coming from a sales organization and have a passion for ALM, there is some inbuilt problem here with that it's given to the customer. It's license free. So we being a sales organization, it's not that comes naturally that we promote because we're into selling software and services.
Exactly. So why bother spending time on things that are free? No.
But on a TCO perspective, it is really great contribution.
It just costs the learning curve and to find resources that actually deal with it, because operating a Solman system doesn't come for free either.
No.
Right, but the license is embedded in the support fee.
But you say the benefits outweigh the costs to actually get it up and running?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I would say yes. But again, for Solman, you probably need a team of 2-3 persons, not full-time. But the more you use in Solman, because it's such a broad tool, the more people you might need, and that costs, of course, something. But I think in the end, you get a lot out of it, because then once you have that system in place, you have a defined set of procedures, right?
But no, I mean let's get the definitions in place, because some of our listeners may not know exactly what is ALM, what is Application Lifecycle Management. So if you were to sort of put a definition on that, what would it be? Yeah, I think you alluded to it somehow already, but let's get the firm.
Yeah. So I would say application lifecycle management includes the whole spectrum of deciding what you intend to buy applications for. So it's kind of, SAP calls this the discovery phase. Companies internally would probably call it capability, understanding of what capabilities are needed from IT systems. So I would say it starts off in enterprise architecture.
Okay.
Right? Where you have your business strategy defined, try to map it to capabilities you need, and then finding systems or applications that give you the right or the bang for the buck. And that, of course, connects down to program management and purchasing decisions, doing proof of concepts, contracting, implementation partners, or if you do it internally, to have a good approach to doing scoping and procurement. And that's what I see today, maybe, that many companies forget about the ALM perspective in their procurement.
Okay.
Because if you can look ahead, once you start that program or that project, and you want to make use of certain tools, and you want to end up in operations of the delivered systems, maybe all of that could have some input into the RFQs that you put out to vendors. I actually once, at some point in time at SAP, was doing a service for one customer where we produced an appendix to an RFQ, which was only dealing with the ALM part of it. So that every vendor would be able to read up about, okay, what are the plans, where do we want to go when the vendor that is engaged for an implementation is leaving.
But this is a very, very broad definition, broader than I kind of envisioned it, because at SAP, when I hear and talk about ALM, it's kind of very focused on the life cycle of an application that is indeed already there, whereas you are kind of also taking it, a bit earlier. So it's also part of the process, and I guess that's sort of a little bit hen and the egg, right? Because I mean, if we today we will end up discussing tools for ALM, right? But if you have a tool, decided on a particular tool, let's say Solman or Cloud ALM that we will discuss later on, then you are already tied somehow to a vendor, right? So there must be some ways of making those decisions independently of the vendor choice that you have made earlier on.
No, when I hear you saying this, I think it's an interesting perspective, because SAP traditionally we have just sold software. Now we are selling a service, of a cloud service, a life cycle. The importance of ALM becomes even more important now, with us being a cloud provider, which operates the solution as well. To give this guidance, I think the importance of this tool is increasing as we are changing.
ALM, I'm looking at ALM maybe not only from a tool perspective. For me, ALM is a business process, like procurement processes or finance processes or maintenance processes. So the IT department is a business department, and it delivers some value, of course, internal value, but it is following business processes. And that's where I try to start discussing with my customers to see, okay, how do you understand yourself as a department, as a line of business IT, which then needs to figure out what are the tools that we deploy for the capabilities that we need or that we have in our organization. And I mean, we see that today that SAP is delivering 3 tools, you could say, for the application lifecycle management when we just focus on the S4 transition and then the S4 implementation and operations, which is like the Solman or Cloud ALM, but it is Signavio and it is Tricentis, which become more and more integrated with each other. So it's not only about Solman and Cloud ALM as an ALM tool, it's a set of tools. And in addition to that, many customers, they don't even use any SAP tool for ITSM. So it's a third-party mix with, third-party best of breed solution landscape when we talk about ALM solutions.
So you're really saying that coming from the processes that you need to do, investigate the processes for what IT is supposed to deliver, and then comes the tools that can support that underneath. And maybe serves a good purpose for a certain part of the process.
Okay, but let's take it then step by step. So you start, your ALM journey starts by, doing capability mapping, exploring the processes. What would be the right tool to do that?
Okay. Now you get me on my left foot, right? Difficult to say. I mean, if we think SAP, then of course they position the Signavio suite nowadays. And I feel this is of course an area where also all ALM resources need to start learning because it is connected so much, right? On top of that, we talk about the enterprise architecture tools that, of course, need to be connected there. I think we can leave that topic out of this discussion maybe today. If we want to go down the ALM road and talk Solman and Cloud ALM, maybe more. But just to point it out, I feel personally it's really important that the customer IT organization has that thought in their discussion. And we don't have to go down that road. It is just, I mean, for me, it's a key point that ALM is not just once you are in production and want to manage your applications. It is also how to do that, and of course there's a wide choice of applications, but in the SAP portfolio, at least you have Signavio there to help you out. Yeah.
And on that note, I mean, also then Signavio is teaming up with LeanIX for the clean capabilities, where they are good at processes, business processes. Where that evolves, will Signavio expand its footprint into more of capabilities, or is it teaming up even harder with LeanIX? I mean, we have initiatives in this space, so that. And then we see a natural feed into the ALM tools. But if we're moving closer to the IT side of the processes and the tools we have there, then maybe we're. Otherwise, we can go on. We can have another pod about this topic.
So let's assume that the capability mapping has been done. You have decided on the right approach in terms of which applications. Then you need to start your, let's say you've decided on S4 somehow and some particular processes there. Then you need to get started on your project, and then let's say Solman and Focus Build kicks in, right? Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, I mean we have these two options today, 2 products from SAP side, use Solution Manager or Cloud ALM, and both of these tools of course then focus on one part of the coin, which is implementing the solution, supporting the project delivery, and after go live or even during the project you can start operating, monitoring the systems, and the old-fashioned way to do it is with Solman and Focus Build, which has been around for a couple of years now. I've been working with Focus Build since 2018, 17, 18. And that is really, let's say, a best practice for delivering SAP solutions, as I would phrase it. Yeah, like SAP has best practices for all the other products, or many other products, for the S4 module-based processes, and Focus Build would be then for the line of business IT, the best practice to make use of when going for S4 implementations or GTS implementations, you name it, right? All the different applications, and maybe even non-SAP IT systems. If you think about the process perspective of any IT system, why not delivering?
You have a design and a test
with, exactly,
and deploy in any application.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Activate roadmap, which has its phases with prepare and explore and realize and then deploy, which is can be used for any stream, any functional stream that you have on your radar, right?
Yeah. To me, it's still a little bit abstract. So what exactly is what is a day in the life of a person that are involved with the Focus Build?
The past couple of years, I've been through three S4 projects, or involved in S4 projects with Focus Build usage. So partly, of course, as we have the Solman landscape productive, it's not a project as such at that time. Of course, before that, you should have a project that is looking at how to implement Focus Build, how to make use of Focus Build rather. Implementing it is relatively easy because it's a best practice, it's a pre-configured solution. You have to do some kind of setup, of course, manually connected to your decisions, how you want to make use of Focus Build. But once that is in place, it's more about working with the user organization to
train them,
and to help them making the decisions about ways of working where you have a freedom. Yeah, we have certain things that you can set up in Focus Build which are complementary to the predefined configuration, like there are master data to be put in, like categorization schemas. You can put in additional text types if you want to structure the way you do journaling with Focus Build connected to your change transactions. There may be some authorization work to do if you want to improve or restrict the governance that Focus Build brings by default. So there's some coaching, some kind of application functional consulting involved. But then once the system is under use, of course, you have the normal operations and support. And there are a lot of questions, because many consultants that get engaged in these S4 deliveries, they may not have worked with Focus Build before. Many of them have some experiences from using Charm, but Charm is delivered on the CRM component of Solution Manager, whereas Focus Build has an own UI.
Okay.
It's all UI5, it's web-based, and to get used to that is, of course, also for long experienced SAP consultants, something new.
And just for the record, Charm, change and release management.
Yes.
And that's an interesting thing. So what you're saying is that when the project team comes, Focus Build is configured, it's ready.
Should be.
It should be.
It is not always.
No. Okay. So that I have experienced that.
Yes.
That it should be the first system in a sense that is established.
Yeah.
Because then come the project team.
If the customer is focusing on ALM and understanding the role of ALM tools, then of course the customer would be prepared and would have focus on putting that in place during the prepare phase of a program or project, or maybe even earlier, right? But I've been also in situations where the customer has kicked off, the resources got onboarded, they started doing explore phase work, and then the Solman team needed to rush through the setup of the system and then catch up with the project management organization to give them an understanding of what focus build is supposed to be used for.
My guess that is the normal situation, even
I
if
mean,
it's not an ideal.
As I said, I've been through 3 customers with S4 programs now. 2 of them were in this later described situation, and one of them was actually doing a little bit more preparation earlier on. I cannot speak for the big amount of focus build based transformations that run across the globe, but I guess many such programs, they try to catch up.
Yeah.
And most often, I feel, at least what I hear also from peers, is that there is some kind of conflict, or it's a controversy between who is actually requiring focus build. You know, partners that get engaged to do the S4 programs and projects, they haven't maybe thought about focus build when they put their quote, when they received the contract. And the customer itself was quite unaware as well at the time of doing the negotiations and the contracting. But then they understand, Activate is talking about focus build and Solman, and we also need to think about what happens after go live. Where should we
Have our documentation.
How should we manage hypercare? How should we work with monitoring and all these things?
Well, I mean, in all fairness, many partners will have their own methodology. They may have their tools, made a decision on how they do things, and that may or may not involve a focus build, of course. Yeah.
But on that record, we have met with partners who are also investing themselves. So the big partners content into focus build, that they tune it a little bit and maybe bring some content, even more best practices into it, because they have seen the value of the tool and that their team can go in and be prepared.
Yeah.
But just recapping, so it's mostly been meta, kind of, how to get focused build on, but once let's say the process is established properly, the tool is in place, it's configured, right? Now you start your S4 transformation, your project. What is the benefits then of doing it using focus build?
It's like a recipe, right? When you want to bake bread, you follow some kind of guidelines. You have your ingredients and you know what's going to happen over the course until the bread comes out of the oven. And I think it's the same with focus build. You have, and again, I need to come back to Activate. There is this nice big guide explaining how Activate and focus build are supposed to work together. You have your phases, and in explore phase you use the certain features of focus build. You consume your SAP Best Practices, you have the flow charts of your processes, you have your sandbox system, you demo and discuss in workshops, and out of that you get, of course, a customer point of view on what you see in the sandbox. And there may be things that the standard setup of S4 doesn't fulfill, so you start collecting requirements, and the output of these workshops you put in focus build. Yeah.
So you start getting a backlog.
Now you put the flour in the bucket. And then
Awesome.
You start, of course, working with these requirements. You understand, okay, is this configurable to fix this requirement, to bring it into the solution, or do we need to do some kind of developments? So going down deeper and deeper, you put more ingredients in, and then you start working on the dough. And that's kind of the recipe that you can follow, and you know always what comes next if you have understood the flow of focus build. And connected to that, of course, you can have a training plan that you have a project team that first we educate them about how to do the fit gap workshops or fit to standard workshops, how to work with requirements in focus build. And then a month later or 2 months later, you train them on the next step of doing the first steps, using the development system, doing unit testing, getting going, so to speak, on on developing the requirements and setting up the system.
Okay.
Then we come to testing and so on. And
Yeah.
finally the go live. So it's different steps.
I'm thinking of one thing which we are positioning. There is, and we will put it in the link below, the 5 golden rules of implementing S/4HANA. 2 of those 5 golden rules is Activate. Actually 3. So Activate, the best practices, and the ALM tools from SAP.
Yeah.
So those 3 are key. Because then you get a structure, you get a way of working, as you say. The recipe is there. There is a methodology how to go through it, and you can educate because there are materials for the users to use. Enable now, support them if there are some uncertainty, I guess. So it's a best practice.
Okay, yeah, great. That's a good point. But you know, Solman is sort of reaching end of life.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, will some
Yeah.
say.
2027.
Yes. So there's a new kit on the block now, Cloud ALM.
Yeah.
And how does that kit fit into what we have talked about so far?
Yeah, Cloud ALM is kind of positioned as another ALM tool, next generation ALM tool by SAP. And what SAP also communicates is it should not be understood as a successor or replacement of Solman. So very important that I want to also communicate that.
Because that's a challenge. I'm sometimes from SAP in that position. Can it do exactly the same? When is it exactly the same?
It cannot and probably will never be doing the same all over. But of course, it's very easy to also just fall into, we need to look at Cloud ALM because Solman is ending, right? We need to move at some point in time. But dealing with that additional tool, I've been being able to work with it already more than a year. It takes time to learn new things, right? We all know that. And only when getting into the details, you really understand the differences and you start liking and disliking. And therefore, I would just say, get on it, do things, explore. You cannot break it. Right, it's a completely different tool. It's a cloud solution.
It's a SaaS solution.
It's a SaaS solution. You don't have to implement it technically, like when we talk about technology or infrastructure, etc. As such, there's of course a small amount of implementation to be done to get it up and running and to get data into it. But I mean, I'm not a techie guy. I'm not an SAP basis consultant. I'm not an SAP programmer, but I've been driving the establishment, I would call it, of Cloud ALM for at least one of my customers, and I felt this is quite manageable for me as a street guy without being an IT savvy person on that technical level, right?
So Meta all of a sudden becomes less of a problem. You kind of get started right away, and you are independent of basis resources, as you say, and just get started.
You need to work together with basis because in many companies, I think basis is still the team that also took or got responsibility for the business technology platform. Yeah, you need to have access to that in order to get going with Cloud ALM. So you can do it as a one-man person if you have all the accesses, and then you read up documentation from SAP side on that matter is really good. So theoretically, you can do it all alone. But if you have that team, you have your basis guy, and then you have access to the chain of the system you want to connect to Cloud ALM. You can do it within one day, right?
Yeah, and listening to our friends down in Waldorf, Mark, they are even saying we can do it in 15 minutes. But if it's a day or a day or whatever.
What they say is in 15 minutes you have the email that a cloud tenant is available for you. Right?
Yeah.
In 15 minutes you don't have your data from S4 system in Cloud ALM.
No, and that's maybe how we communicate.
Yeah.
But it's compared to Solution Manager was, it was a homebrew of a lot of capabilities. It contains BW, it contains CRM functionality, it's the web, it's the spider in the web connected to all systems.
Yeah.
It's a challenging system to get up in a mint condition.
Yeah.
So there, I guess, it's a different game.
Yeah.
Introducing this Cloud ALM.
Yeah.
Down the line, and where Cloud ALM will be the only tool, what happens then to focus build, or will there be a sort of methodology using Cloud ALM then to execute what you just explained?
Cloud ALM has two main sections right now, or three actually, but the two we talk about before was then implementing SAP solutions and maybe non-SAP solutions, and then operating, monitoring and like alerting, these type of things. So the implementation part in Cloud ALM is not like Focus Build, but of course you can do most of the things you can do in Focus Build now already or soon with Cloud ALM for implementation. Yeah, from creating projects to collecting requirements to doing change and release management, deploying transports from your dev to your queue to your pre-prod to your prod system that can be triggered from Cloud ALM. We have the testing connected there, the S4 HANA Cloud, the embedded automated testing is running. You can run that from Cloud ALM, and the Tricentis will be integrated, let's say, natively in Cloud ALM. And also Signavio. And
that's maybe for those who listen to this, if you listen to this 6 months down the road, there could be a different, exactly what is working, because there is an intense expansion of the functionality of Cloud ALM.
Yeah, it's delivered in a completely different fashion than any product that I've been working this before. I think even compared to the S4 Public Cloud, Cloud ALM is getting the fixes daily. I think corrections are set productive every day when needed. And then every second week there is a feature set release for new stuff that has been on the backlog and has become ready. And last year in October there was this conference about ALM from SAP perspective. So it's called the ALM Summit, where I was participating, and there was this one presentation from the technical architecture behind Cloud ALM, and that was really interesting to understand how Cloud ALM is delivered, to get some internal glimpse of SAP's production of this application, where of course you need to make sure that everything is tested before you ship it. So that would be really nice to look deeper behind the scene and understand, okay, how do they do that? Because from that, of course, customers could learn as well.
Yeah, it's not uncommon that customers sometimes ask us, can we understand how you are thinking? Because that can be a mindset of us either copying that mindset, so we follow the same logic.
I mean, you're producing software, right? You're doing a product, but we are maintaining an SAP product for our end users, and it's an ALM process. You produce software, you need to test, you need to be sure before you release it to a productive tenant and thousands of customers get that feature. You need to be sure it works. And that ALM process, of course, we would like to understand, or I would like to understand, in order to take that knowledge to my customers to discuss the internal ALM processes.
And on that note, because I'm have a little bit similar role, Where I have landed today, June, or 1st of June, 1st of June, is that monitoring. There, it's a easy going in position. You get value quite fast. Implementation, if you have a complex landscape where you have this two-chain, project chain, maintenance chain, dual landscape, it's not yet there. But our product management, solution management, they are saying it will come, but these complex landscapes, we are still struggling. I don't know if have you reflected on this or come across this, that implementation versus operation?
In my network with ALM and project managers, I have discussed that Cloud ALM has been tried to be used like a year ago, or even more than a year ago. And at that time, those colleagues then realized, okay, there is still too much lacking, that we cannot use it for an S4 public cloud solution 2 years ago. That's it. Again, 2 years ago.
Yeah, got it. Yeah.
Now I think if I would get involved in an S4 public cloud or private cloud implementation project, I think, and the customer is open to explore this tool, and there would be enough time to at least set a foundation, I would dare to say, let's do it. Right? If the customer really has no Solman footprint, and it's a public cloud solution, private cloud edition, S4 program, take the time to look at that, take your future operations organization, bring them into an own team alongside the S4 team, to talk about how would we do this best in order to be prepared for after go live. Yeah, I mean, at one of my customers, we've been doing this S4 Greenfield on-premise program, and now we are 3 years into it. We've done 6 major releases with Focus Build. Last year we discussed then, okay, what's next? How should we look at the other side of the coin with monitoring and operations? What can we do? And without fuzzing around a lot, we just said, let's go and connect the productive S4 system to Cloud ALM. Let's connect the productive Solman system to Cloud ALM. Yeah. So because then we, from the ALM team, we had the possibility to work with the Solman system, get the data, see how the background jobs work, look at the monitoring, health monitoring, and such things. Get some kind of proof of concept looking at data from the Solman system, but then very quickly we worked with the customer as a service provider for maintenance. So we engaged the resources there that were dealing with monitoring manually on the productive systems, running SM37 for background jobs and you name it, IDOC monitoring, etc. We formed a small team to have those colleagues together with us from the ALM team to look at Cloud ALM and work with the data, the productive data coming out of the S4 system, and define new ways of working using Cloud ALM.
Okay.
Connected to that, we presented that as a customer case in last October's conference, which was appreciated very much. So if you are a customer that is, let's say, innovative in the IT organization, which is curious to understand what the new tools can do.
And we all are.
We all are, of course, everybody should be. It's fun to be able to learn together, also across organizational boundaries, and then also communicate about this and maybe share it with the peers.
There, on that note, I raise a finger because we tell the business that, hey, here comes best practices. Change your mindset of working. This is not a differentiating process for you. This is commodity standard. So please change your way of working. Same mindset, I would say, would be fair to tell the IT. open your mind. This is a new way of working. You have done it like that. Maybe this, it's not.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
and then
Yeah.
then you are going into it. So IT also needs to change.
Yeah.
We are entering a new cloud-based world, and with that comes some pros and cons with it.
But I mean, I think your guideline makes a lot of sense. So I mean, we have used Focus Build, but at least Solution Manager. Start using Cloud ALM for monitoring. Get your head around the tool, and then as you learn it and get familiar with the tool for the monitoring part, at some project down the line, you will start to use it then also for implementation purposes. Yeah.
And you can have it up and running both of the monitoring scenarios, right? You can have the agent-based data collection pushed into Solution Manager. You can have your monitoring setup running there. Connect your system to Cloud ALM. You receive the data there as well. Not based upon the agents, but upon the pull mechanism. Or it's a push as well, but not with agents. And then you can, of course, compare your ways of working. Yeah. Cloud ALM, I wouldn't phrase that you need to do a Cloud ALM implementation in the way we think about implementing. Of course, you need to implement it into your organization, but this is rather like how do we make use of Cloud ALM?
Yeah.
Understanding, learning about how it works, what you get out of it, and how you adopt it into your ways of working. Yeah.
But speaking of monitoring, end-to-end life cycle of your business processes, what does it entail? What is it that we monitor? What is it that you use Solman or Cloud ALM to monitor that the integrations work, that systems are up and running, nothing is failing?
Yes, we have. I mean,
yes.
The bottom part is, of course, the health monitoring, which is comparable to the system monitoring that you would do on a technical level. Those customers who have their on-premise systems at HEC, for instance, they do not really care about system monitoring because that is done by HEC as part of the agreement there, where HEC, of course, is using Focus Run, which is this other ALM product, which we maybe not talk about so much in detail in this session. But then when you go from health monitoring upwards, then you would look at different functional aspects on your systems. It's the jobs, it's the integrations of various types. You can have the PI system monitored from Cloud ALM. And then you can go up one level where you can say, okay, I have my technical perspective of how the systems, either as an individual system or as a chain of systems, how they work to deliver on a business use case. So you can define business services in which you say, okay, I have a link, I have an S4 system, I have a PI system, and then I have an external system, third-party system, and this is kind of a chain of events. And if any of these events fails, my business service is out.
Yeah. Okay.
And so you can then say, I monitor my business services, even though you monitor the technical aspects. And you can inform the IT if the technical part breaks, but at the same time, on the business service, you inform the business process owner. It
makes sense.
It's all there in Solman as well, but now we can do this from Cloud ALM with much less implementation effort on the technical side.
And I just want to raise a finger for the power of what has been in Solman for a long time, and which now Signavio they are capturing a lot of KPIs from the backend. There is a service called Process Insight where they are having a lot of KPIs. That was actually accessible with this business process analytics in Solman. So the data was captured, KPIs was measured, how many sales orders have been processed, days outstanding, what was failing. So the foundation was there, but now we are having it in a lot in Signavio, this KPI monitoring. But I guess in Cloud ALM and Stillman you also have.
In Cloud ALM you have the KPIs from business process monitoring there as well.
Yeah.
Well-known KPI catalog, key figures. Yes.
Yeah. But to the wider audience, I'm not sure that it was well known that it actually was there. But
is there any intelligence built into this? I spoke to a retailer the other day that they get millions of messages all the time. They are connected to all their stores and what have you. And they are not as such interested in the individual failure because integrations fail all the time for some reason or the other. They are rather interested in trends, or let's say, or perhaps even clubbing together failures so that you see, okay, so now today we have a kind of specific type of failure that occurs all the time, so that we instead of looking at the individual failures, we need to take a higher and elevated look at that.
That is there in the form of APIs. So it's Cloud ALM is delivered with a broad catalog of APIs to get data in or out. And from what you ask for, I would say it may be easier to get a connection from your production system into Cloud ALM and from there the data out than getting the data out of your production system directly to any kind of reporting solution.
That makes sense as a mediator.
Because the data flow into Cloud ALM is a kind of easily established and then you have a predefined API. We are kind of looking into this, for instance, to get certain data out of Cloud ALM into SAP Cloud Analytics, or Analytics Cloud, I think it's called. But I've also seen in this last fall's conference, there was one use case where they really had built a board, dashboard for the board of a company, getting data from Cloud ALM into another layer of reporting. So that was very interesting to see.
Okay, so what you're saying is that ALM cleans the data so it becomes in a manner that you could look at and analyze.
Not cleaning the data, but making it easily extractable, right? Because it's already pre-delivered that you can get the data out of Cloud ALM into any reporting tool that you choose.
That makes sense. Then you have this one-stop shop for your monitoring information, regardless of the complexity of the landscape. And that leads me to a question that sort of we're moving into a more hybrid landscape, if you will, at SAP. I mean, there are services flowing all around, and business technology platform is now a cornerstone of the SAP strategy, where we basically provide services of various nature. And especially when it comes to implementing new projects, we preach, of course, the extensibility options of the BTP platform to ensure that you have this clean core in your projects. And I guess part of a project is to establish the right work packages, as you mentioned. How do we ensure that we do these changes in the right way? Some within the S4 application, but a lot of them within the business technology platform. And if we do it there, can we use the ALM tool to, let's say, coordinate the whole thing?
Yeah, for sure.
I was hoping so.
I would guess, and I see at least from what I have learned about Cloud ALM, that SAP is in the production of Cloud ALM aware of this change in architecture and change in development guidelines, I would say. I mean, previously, if you would have on the ECC times, you would have somebody who would have written configuration guidelines. How do we do configuration? What do we do? What do we not do? Same with the development guidelines. How do we go for ABAP and how do we work? We have tools like Code Inspector and ATC and all these checks that you can have rule-based things. A similar set of like theoretical foundation or kind of a prep for the resource base, the developers that should work, of course, need to be established at every customer project. Yeah, there should be somebody, a technical architect or a development architect that is taking responsibility to define what do we do, how and where, and that the discussion on the requirement level, as soon as you realize we have a gap, that you need to engage in a discussion, okay, what does that mean? How can we solve it? And that this pathway is prepared in a way that you have competence in place. First of all, to make the decision to really have somebody who understands how does BTP ABAP-based delivery work? How does side-by-side, how does on-system extension work? Have that competence in the team, and then of course a governance process around to make the decision and then embark on delivering.
Yeah, okay.
And there I haven't been. I said before, if I would get engaged in such a, let's say, modern S4 delivery program, of course, I as a coach or as an ALM consultant would not only go in and talk about how do we use Cloud ALM, but I always dare to ask the questions to PMO, to the customer architects about these side aspects of ALM. I mean, we talked about enterprise architecture. I would like to know, do you work with enterprise architecture? Do you work with business process management? Are you interested in modeling your flows, or is it fine if we do post-it notes, or and all belongs together, and you need to, if you understand the whole picture, you can get a good ALM grip.
And I think the last 3 years-ish, the need for guidance in this area is higher, because we have 20 plus years of in our spine where we develop on ECC. But now we have BTP in play. And where do you do what? Those guidance. This is a good situation when it makes good sense to develop it on BTP, and give that guidance to the project. So this is I think a call for action for all those people who are working in the SAP space. We are not building like we did on ECC always. But I think I think still it's a learning curve for a lot of developers.
Absolutely. And I mean, the more tools and guidelines we can bring to sort of guide it properly and to make that transition easier, the better, of course.
And also this, just to defend, in our suite qualities, we talk about our suite qualities. One of the 6 that is sticking out, there is ALM being one of those 6. So we have the new user interface, we have blueprints, and we have master data. But there is one which is how do you work with ALM? So how is your mindset changing now, going cloud-based solutions? So good to hear that, Ingo.
Yeah, just to, I mean, one question then, now that you mentioned cloud, I mean, so S/4HANA public cloud, that's one aspect of SAP, or private cloud for that matter, but there are also, the Aribas, the Concur, the success factors, and so on, and they also entail projects as such.
Yeah.
Would you use ALM to manage packages, work packages there, or implementation projects as well?
Sure.
Great.
Maybe even that was able to be done before S4 entered the scene in the context of Cloud ALM. I mean, the success factors, best practices were published there before S4 came in. The Ariba best practices are published there. again, back to the implementation partners here. There are a lot of companies, partners around that have been focusing on Ariba and SuccessFactors implementations, and they have developed their own methodologies. Yes. They have delivery accelerators, internal ones, which of course they base their project offers on.
Yeah.
And now we suddenly have this tool set and would require internal investment in the partner community to do another round of how do we do SuccessFactors implementations now when SAP has this and our customers demand this or expect this.
Yeah.
There has been actually earlier this year an ALM partner conference hosted by the product management of ALM tools and
ALM Summit.
Not ALM Summit. No. ALM Summit is the kind of broader ALM community focusing event, and the ALM Partner Conference is only for partners.
Yeah.
Those companies that work with ALM tools, either being system implementation partners or pure ALM consultancy companies. But there, of course, the discussions were a lot around what does that mean now for the partner community that we have Cloud ALM, that there may be proprietary methodologies, and how to merge this together, right? And also to give partners more insight about how SAP is thinking about this, and to also request from the partner community input. SAP is very open-minded in that respect, is my feeling, to get quick turnaround feedback. What do we do? What can we do? And what do we want to do with Cloud ALM?
And on that note, now that this is a side question, do we offer that partners can ingest the Activate methodology? Can we change if we get these are the steps that you need to do? Can you add additional steps? Do you know that?
Yeah, I mean, you can in Cloud ALM you have the Activate roadmaps, different flavors available. I mean, they are updated and maintained by SAP, but of course every partner can complement the content in Cloud ALM with own tasks, project tasks that you upload in. You start a project based on Activate, and then you push in additional.
Because I guess we are not perfect. It's a really good base, but then our implementers who have been doing this for a long time, they might have some good.
To be sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
So that possibility exists, and I guess there are partners around that already have done this and work with this. Both for S4 deliveries, but also for these cloud solutions.
But sometimes there are no partners involved, and we will actually record a podcast with another company soon, where insourcing is a big topic, and basically for their ongoing development tasks, they have a multi-year project in place, of course, but a lot of their change requests are being done by their own developers, basically.
I'm actually involved with one customer who is not having one go-to implementation partner and not one go-to maintenance service provider. They do a lot of work internally, of course, not only with employed resources, but with resource pooling, getting externals in.
And for a customer like that, where you do not have, well, hopefully you do have some processes on changes, but their ALM for sure could be a great tool to adopt to get structure in the way you organize yourselves.
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well, I had one. I mean, you're out there on the field meeting the customers, advising. Would you have any call for action towards SAP? Hey guys, this is not turning. maybe not product wise, because that is happening every second week. We heard, but we're improving. But would that be something that you think SAP could do better in towards success for implementing and monitoring?
I mean, communication is of course essential. I think there is a lot going on, and this mantra. You cannot over communicate if you want to communicate something. But on the other hand, if you get bombarded with stuff all the time, it can be too much and customers just shut down.
Yeah.
I think personally the ALM product team is doing very well. It's doing a lot of good communication. I would just say customers, I think, need to spend time to actually open up and educate themselves. Right? This lifelong learning, this is really, the time is now, again, to think about this. And there's so much happening if we think BTP, we think Cloud ALM, if we think SAP as such, strategy. Many companies still, I think, are discussing how should we do the S4 move. But maybe many customer resources are not well enough educated yet even to go for this decision making, which is also why it is maybe taking longer times than we think. Yeah, because there is so much going on right now that where you need to lean back once more and think, are we really on the right track? Do I need to learn more to make the right decision?
Yeah. That's an eternal problem, I guess. But I mean, coming back to your comment earlier on, I mean, at SAP, I mean, I get it that we communicate ALM well, apparently, but clearly not good enough, because I think we tend, at least in a sales office like the Danish one here, where we are driven by quotas and to disregard this part and leave that up to the implementation partners, but we need also to emphasize the benefits of this. Yeah.
In the years I was at SAP, of course, we were always discussing how is Solman communicated, and then it was rarely mentioned and discussed when license sales happened. Right? Now I think this is turning, or I hope it's turning, if you guys go out and do pre-sales, that if customers buy subscriptions, that those persons who do the signing of a subscription contract, that they actually are aware of, tomorrow I have an email for a Cloud ALM tenant.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
If that is not taken care of on the lowest level of the communication, then we can talk about Cloud ALM in communications and in summits, whatever. If nobody goes there because they know they have this as part of their deal, therefore, I was thinking earlier, just while we were discussing, I mean, years ago there was this SAP 01 course.
Yeah.
Overview of SAP. I have no clue if that is still around for S4 or if that is nowadays refreshed like a 4 days course. Because when I was at Stora Enso starting off in this SAP program, the whole team was sent to SAP Sweden for a 4 days education, SAP 01. And I mean,
I'm sure there is in one shape or form an SAP 01.
But such an introduction, of course, need to bring together S4, BTP, Cloud ALM, and maybe the Signavio Tricentis if it is not packaged. I mean, there is this big slide of the core with how to go about if you want to implement S4. But if that is turned into an overview course so that project newcomers can get a foundational layer.
And maybe also senior people, how it fits together in the new architecture.
It makes a lot of sense.
That triggered me. I will start. Do we have a 01?
Don't you still have this education department here in Denmark?
Well, we have a department, but no room.
It's virtual now.
We still have
e-learning
people that manage training, but it's all online now, so we do not have these.
And of course, I know that the SAP ALM team is working on a new open sub-course for Cloud ALM. And that's, of course, very hard as well for them, because the system is getting new features every 2 weeks. If they do recordings to do an education like an open sub-course, just a month later, much of the recordings may be outdated because there's new stuff.
Yeah, that's a fact of life.
And that is also not a problem, but it's of course a challenge, or it's a new way for us on the customer side if we start to work with Cloud ALM, making user guides for things that we decide how do we want to work with the system is how often should we refresh these? I mean, to make a good user guide, you need to have a screenshot.
Yeah.
But then maybe 3 months down the road, the screenshot looks a little bit different.
Yeah.
So to keep that updated is, of course, hard.
Yeah.
We've been just through this ourselves because we've been doing guinea pigging the Cloud ALM implementation part for ourselves in my Solman team, where we've created a project for our Solman upgrade. Right, so we've put the Solman processes in Cloud ALM. We've put test cases for Solman and Focus Build in. We've made our requirements and user stories as a replacement of a test plan. So we were using this kind of setup to really run a Solman upgrade project, using the defects there, using features, connected transports, and deploying to production. And by that, you really learn what it means to look at this and define, to understand how the features, how the
feature and function
application works, and then what you actually need to put on top in terms of brainware and ways of working decisions. And we were discussing then, this is now a one-time approach. It's a guinea pig. Let's not write any user guides. We're anyhow just 5 or 6 people that deal with this upgrade project. But if we would now go for another implementation of any other SAP product alongside this S4 and BW landscape which is in place, let's say if they would go for GRC or if they would go for GTS or whatever, maybe we would say, okay, based upon this experience now, let's try to do this with Cloud ALM as well. Just to get an experience.
Yes. Get your hands dirty.
Yes.
That is good advice.
Yeah.
And on that note, I think we need to sort of wrap it up. It has been a great conversation, Ingo.
Yeah.
I have learned a lot, at least some key takeaways for sure. But is there any extra advice you would like to bring to ALM users before we round it off completely?
I mean, most of the guys, not maybe everybody who's listening or viewing this, but in Sweden at least, most of the guys know how to find me via my engagement in the SAPSA user group as well. So there we talk ALM, we have a focus group. We meet regularly, and of course we help each other out to discuss ALM matters.
Right.
And on that record, maybe we should conclude this recording that we also have teamed up with the Danish community to bring the ALM Roadshow to the Nordics, at least Sweden and Denmark do it together this spring here in June in the office here.
Yeah. So what is it? Is it the 9th, 8th?
13th.
13th of June. So,
yes. So very, very soon.
Yeah, very soon, and maybe so soon that this recording isn't there when, but maybe.
We will see.
Yeah, but hopefully it will be a great event.
Yeah.
And or perhaps it was a great event because you were listening.
It was a great event, or will be a great event.
Exactly, yeah. Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Ingo.
Yeah,
Thank
for
you.
having me.
Thanks
Most
for coming.
And thanks for coming, yeah. So this was another episode of Data Lab Dialogues. We'll be back soon again.